Hello, and thank you for joining us. This is the fourth webinar in Tanenbaum's six-part World Olympics for All webinar series. Hello, and thank you for joining us. This is the fourth webinar in Tanenbaum's six-part World Olympics for All webinar series. It's based on Unit 4 of our World Olympics curriculum, Learning About Being an Athlete. I'd like to thank the Nissan Foundation and the Pine Tree Foundation of New York for their generous support. Throughout today's webinar, we'll be using the poll, question, and hand-raising features in order to get input from you. So I look forward to your participation. If you're new to this webinar platform, please take note of the features of your control panel, which include features that allow you to ask questions and participate in the polls. Note that this webinar is being recorded, and all registrants will be emailed a link to the recording soon after the live session ends. I will be reading aloud some of your comments from the question box so that you can hear from one another and your participation can get captured in the recording. My name is Kim Kaiserman, and I'm an Education Program Associate here at Tanenbaum, and I'm here with my colleague Liz Jocelyn, who will be helping me to answer your questions. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Tanenbaum, we're a nonprofit organization that works to bridge religious differences and combat religious prejudice. We're based in New York City, and we work in schools, healthcare settings, workplaces, and areas of armed conflict. We are a secular, non-sectarian organization, which means that we don't have any religious agenda. We don't promote or denigrate religion or any particular belief system. I'd like to start today's webinar with a few questions to find out what you know about the role of women athletes in Olympic history. So we're going to open our first poll now. When were women first allowed to compete in the modern Olympic Games? We'll give you just a minute to answer the question. Okay, I think we can close the poll and move on to the next question. The second question is, at the 2016 Summer Olympics in Rio de Janeiro, there will be A, more medal events for men, B, more medal events for women, or C, an equal number of medal events for men and women. Okay, so we can close that poll and move on to our third question, also our last question. At the end of March, the top 5 players in the U.S. women's soccer team filed a lawsuit against the U.S. Soccer Federation. Why? A, because the women are asked to play on artificial fields much more often than men, putting them at risk of injuries. B, because the women are paid as little as 40% of what their male counterparts make. Or C, because an official stated that female players ride on the coattails of men. All right, I think we can close the poll now. We'll go over the answer to those questions in just a minute after we introduce the content of today's webinar. As you know by now, this webinar series is based on our World Olympics curriculum, which uses the example of the Olympics to develop students' academic, physical, and socio-emotional skills. We're excited to tell you that we've recently updated the curriculum for the 2016 Summer Games in Rio. And as you probably know, the first 100 people who registered for this webinar series received a free copy of the curriculum. And all of you should have received that by now. If you are not one of the first 100 registrants, we hope that you'll consider purchasing a copy of the curriculum in its updated edition, Liz is going to send you a link to the curriculum page from our website. The curriculum is made up of 5 units plus instructions for putting together your own culminating Olympic event. For more details, including the number of hours of instruction, please see the handout entitled World Olympics Units and Activities Chart, which can be found in the handout section of your control panel. Here are the objectives of Unit 4 as well as of today's webinar. There are 3 lessons in Unit 4, and we're going to touch on all of them in today's webinar. Here they are, along with the approximate number of instruction hours. These lessons introduce students to the diversity of athletes and build skills that prevent stereotyping. All of them are included in your handouts. So let's go over the answers to our pop quiz before we explore the first lesson. Number 1, when were women first allowed to participate in the modern Olympic Games? Let's see. 88% said 1904. In fact, the answer is 1900, so that's pretty early on in modern Olympic history. Women were allowed to compete at that second Olympic Games, but at that time they were only permitted to participate in tennis and golf. After that, participation by women has increased steadily. By the time of the 1992 Summer Olympics, however, there were still 35 countries that were fielding all-male delegations, and at that time the IOC made a major push to change this. At the 2012 Olympic Games in London, for the first time in history, every country competing included female athletes. The 2012 Olympic Games were historic for several other reasons. They were the first Olympics in which women competed in all sports in the program. They had the highest percentage of women athletes ever at 45%, and the American team for the first time sent more female athletes than male, 269 to 261. Okay, next question. At the 2016 Summer Olympics in Rio de Janeiro, there will be more medal events for men, is the correct answer. And most people said an equal number. Not quite. There will be 136 medal events for women and 161 for men, and then 9 mixed events. Okay, last question. At the end of March, the top 5 players on the U.S. women's soccer team filed a lawsuit against the U.S. Soccer Federation. Why? And let's see. 88% of you said because they're paid as little as 40% of what the men make, and that is the right answer. Answer A is actually true. Women are asked to play on artificial fields more often than men and have complained about it a great deal, but that's not what this particular lawsuit is about. And C is actually a statement that was made by a tennis official, not a soccer official. Okay, so we can move on to the first lesson in Unit 4, Put Me In, Coach, I'm Ready to Play. This lesson starts with an interactive role-playing game that is both fun and thought-provoking. 2 of the students play the role of coaches, one who coaches a general academic team and one who coaches a general sports team. 8 of the children play the role of students trying out for school teams, while the rest of the class or group takes notes on what they observe. The coaches are sent out of the room, and the players are given cards which list their physical traits on one side and their non-physical traits on the other. They stand in front of the room and hold the cards in front of them, showing only their character's physical traits. Here is an example for a character called Amina. When the coaches come back in, they can only see the front of the cards, and they are asked to select players for their teams based solely on the physical traits that are listed there. For instance, Amina's physical traits are that she's tall, she's thin and muscular, she has black hair, brown skin, and she wears a headscarf and glasses. The other 7 players are a mix of girls and boys who are diverse in terms of their physical traits, abilities, and clothing choices. For instance, some wear athletic clothing and some do not. Some wear distinctive signs of their religious affiliation and others do not. One student is in a wheelchair. After the coaches have made their choices, the cards are turned over and the player's non-physical traits are revealed. In the case of Amina, we learn that she's a top volleyball player at her school. She loves to play basketball. Her dad taught her to play when she was only 5. And she gets good grades and is an excellent chess player. The players then have the opportunity to express whether or not they're happy with their team, as well as their feelings about the process of being picked for one of the 2 teams. Like Amina, all of the players in this game turn out to have a complex array of skills and interests, many of which are not obvious at first glance. You can continue this lesson by posing questions like these to the participants, asking them, how do you think your character would feel about how he or she was chosen? Would she be happy with the team he or she ended up on? And if he or she could have told the coaches anything before they made their choices, what would it be? Next, you can facilitate a discussion with the whole group. Let's imagine that we've participated in this activity and answer these questions together. So you can answer this first question in the question box. What were some traits of the characters that could not be seen from the outside? Okay, their skill level in sport, their skills in sports, their perseverance. That's a non-physical quality. Anything else? Other interests? Leadership qualities, that's a good one. These are things that are not necessarily obvious when we first see someone or first meet someone. All right, next question. What does this activity teach us about stereotyping based on physical traits and visible identities? Oh, a couple other answers came in. Chess player, right, that's an interesting quality, and sportsmanship. Do not judge a book by its cover. Well put. All right, well, next question. How can stereotyping make it hard to build an effective and happy team? Any thoughts about how can stereotyping make it hard to build an effective and happy team? All right, the team may be unbalanced, right? If you don't really get to know the people, you may not create the right mix of players. People aren't given the chance to prove their worth. People are jealous of those who are put in all of the time. That's right, it can create feelings of not being recognized for your value. If you pick a person last because of how they look, their feelings will be hurt, so their effort may not be good. Another good point. So as you can see, this lesson provides a rich opportunity for class discussion about assumptions based on visible identities, including religious identities, and how these assumptions can harm both the individual who's being judged and the people who surround that individual, because the team as a whole will be hurt. Students learn that when we judge people based on visible identities, we miss important information. We jump to conclusions and we make uninformed choices. When invisible identities are taken into account, the result is a more effective and happy team. The team metaphor can be extended to any of life's activities that require cooperation and mutual support. So this is a good learning experience for students. You can extend this discussion by reading storybooks that deal with the theme of stereotyping based on visible identities. A great example is this book, Smoky Night by Eve Bunting. It's set during the Los Angeles riots of 1992 and explores how the fires and looting force neighbors who harbor stereotypes about one another to come together in the face of danger. We see how stereotypes have limited the neighbors' relationships in the past, and we are left with a strong sense that getting past those stereotypes will benefit them in the future. Liz is going to share a link to this book. Moving on to Lesson 2. Lesson 2 begins with a class discussion, and we're going to begin our look at this lesson by exploring some of the discussion questions together. So the first question is, what is your definition of an athlete? Someone who is willing to try despite their abilities, a person who enjoys playing a sport, someone physically fit who participates in a sport. An athlete is someone who plays a sport and enjoys it, someone who participates, competes in physical competitions, someone who plays well with others. These are all really good definitions. Here's a very traditional definition of an athlete: a person who is trained or skilled in exercises, sports, or games requiring physical strength, agility, or stamina. So my next question for you is, what image comes to mind when you picture an athlete? Who comes to mind if I ask you to picture a famous athlete? Derek Jeter, Jesse Owens. We're going to talk more about him. Misty May Trainer, Michael Jordan, Russell Wilson, Mia Hamm, Steph Curry, Serena Williams. These are all good examples. Anyone else? What characteristics do your athletes share with one another? Oh, Kobe Bryant. So looking at the athletes you chose, what characteristics do your athletes share with each other? Hard work, perseverance, talent, good sportsmanship, team players, they stand out in their sport. Hard work, focus, discipline, dedication, willingness to fail, that's a good one. When you do this lesson with students, you can put them in small groups and have each group come up with an ideal athlete describing that person and what sport or sports they play. And you can have each group create a picture of this ideal athlete on large paper, then present their athlete. So now I'd like you to use the hand raising feature. Thinking back to the question of who comes to mind when you picture an athlete, how many of you thought of a male athlete? Okay, I see 4 hands raised. Okay, how many of you thought of a female athlete? 4 hands raised. How many of you thought of an able-bodied athlete? Okay, 5 hands are raised. And did anyone think of a differently abled athlete? And no hands are raised. So when you're doing this discussion with students, you can ask them to count the number of responses for each question and even have them create a bar graph to show the number of responses to each question. Chances are your students' answers will be skewed toward male athletes and able-bodied athletes. Most people's would be. So this raises the question, and this will be the topic that you can explore with students. Why do we tend to have a narrow concept of athlete and athleticism? Media coverage. Media. Another person says media. So I think we're all on the same wavelength here. We're strongly influenced by the media in in the way that we see a lot of things in life. The media plays a major role in reinforcing stereotypes that we have, and that includes about athletes, just as it plays a role in reinforcing stereotypes about a lot of groups. So this lesson provides a great opportunity to teach greater awareness of media bias and the skills students need to recognize and debunk stereotypes. You can continue this lesson by dividing your students into small groups. Provide them with media images of athletes. You can use the sports pages of major newspapers, sports magazines, and printouts of sports websites. For instance, Sports Illustrated has a site for kids, and Liz is going to send you a link to that site. You can instruct the groups to cut out all the pictures they see of athletes. Ask them to count how many of their athletes are male and how many are female. How many are differently abled? Come together as a whole class and have each group report their numbers. You can actually use this as an opportunity to reinforce math skills by having them create a bar graph or figure out the ratio of male to females, or having them figure out the percentages of males and females. Then you can facilitate a discussion using these questions. What types of sports dominate? What are the characteristics of most of the athletes? What are the roles of women in the articles? Are they supporting roles, or are they major roles? What are some stereotypes about athletes that they find in the articles? And the most important of all, do they see any problems with these stereotypes? So this discussion leads to another question. How can we balance and broaden our perception of who is an athlete? So in the question box, here's a question for you. Can you think of other athletes who balance or expand upon the stereotypical images we see in the media? Here's an example. Bethany Hamilton, who is a professional surfer whose arm was bitten off in a shark attack, and yet she's continued to be an award-winning surfer. Jim Abbott. Anyone else? Oh, Ibtihaj Muhammad, the first Muslim woman competing in a hijab. Marathon participants in wheelchairs. Okay, those are some good examples. Lots of sports have such athletes, but sometimes it's hard to remember the names. Oftentimes they're not household names. So you can continue this lesson by telling your students that you're going to work together as a class or group to create a broader question, a broader answer to the question, who is an athlete? And you can start by researching athletes who don't fit the narrow image of athletes, including women athletes and differently abled athletes and other athletes who challenge the prevailing stereotypes about their sports. This is a very appropriate discussion for a curriculum about the Olympics because the Olympics has a history of providing athletes with opportunities to challenge stereotypes and broaden people's minds. The World Olympics curriculum includes information about pioneering athletes in Olympic sports and non-Olympic sports who defy stereotypes, including Bethany Hamilton, also Lisa Leslie, who's pictured here and was the first WNBA player, one of the first WNBA players, and won 4 Olympic gold medals for basketball. Mia Hamm Garcia Pera, who was the soccer player who won 2 World Cups and 2 Olympic gold medals. Zahra Nemati, who is an archer who at the London Paralympics in 2012 became the first Iranian woman to win a gold medal at an Olympic or Paralympic Games. Laila Ali, who was a multi-world champion boxer in the super middleweight category. She's also the daughter of Muhammad Ali. And Michelle Wie, the LPGA golfer. Of course, you can have students broaden their research beyond those athletes who are spotlighted in the curriculum. A great example of an athlete from history is Wilma Rudolph, who overcame polio to become the fastest woman in the world. In the 1960 Summer Olympics in Rome, she became the first American woman to win 3 gold medals in track and field during a single Olympics game. She also is considered a civil rights leader of the 1960s. You can read Kathleen Kroll's highly acclaimed picture book, Wilma Unlimited, with students. Liz is sharing the link now. And Kathleen Kroll has also written a picture book about 20 different athletes, a very diverse group from history. And Liz is going to share that link as well. And somebody says Wilma Unlimited is a fabulous book. I think so too. There's some other great examples that you can find a lot of information about. A great contemporary non-Olympic example is Misty Copeland, the ballerina who overcame racial and socioeconomic biases to become the first African-American woman to be promoted to principal dancer for the American Ballet Theater. And she's actually written a biography which is appropriate for older kids and a picture book for younger children. And Liz is going to share those links. And one of you mentioned before another great contemporary example, Ibtihaj Muhammad. Muhammad is a saber fencer who is set to be the first U.S. athlete to compete in the Olympics while wearing a hijab. She was a member of the United States 2014 World Champion fencing team and is ranked 7th in the world in her fencing discipline, which is called saber. But when she was making her way up in the sport, she was often the only African-American athlete at a tournament, let alone the only Muslim in a headscarf. She was frequently teased and harassed, but she stuck with it. She has refused to be limited by what she wears. So 2 years ago, she and her siblings launched a women's clothing line called Luella, which specializes in clothing that is fashionable and conforms to the modesty standards of her faith. In the current climate of xenophobia, I think her story is a great one to share with kids to counter stereotypes about Muslims and to reinforce the inclusiveness of the Olympic spirit. And Liz is going to share a couple of articles about Ibtihaj Muhammad with you. So by researching athletes who counter stereotypes, students can examine and debunk media and reinforce stereotypes. They can create an inclusive definition of an athlete in terms of gender, body type, abilities, skills, games, and pursuits. And they can learn to place greater emphasis on the non-physical traits of great athletes. So let's think about that for a moment. What non-physical traits do great athletes have in common? Drive, resilience, perseverance, hard work, love of the sport or the game, commitment to excellence, sportsmanship, that's a really important one. What other pursuits require these same skills? Somebody said education and determination. The arts, medical school, definitely. Everything valuable in life. Doing any hard task like math for many kids. That's a really good point. And then I think I put my slides out of order, so I'm going to go backward for a second here. All right. What is the benefit of broadening kids' definitions of athletes and athleticism? What do you think is the benefit of having this discussion with kids? It encourages all to participate. They can see themselves as having these characteristics. They can see that they can try things too. Makes them more accepting of kids who are different from them. I think these are all good points. These kinds of discussions broaden our understanding of the value of athletic pursuits beyond winning a game or getting in physical shape. We can explore benefits that are less tangible or obvious, but no less important in terms of what is the impact that this kind of work and perseverance has on people's lives. A great book for exploring these ideas is Baseball Saved Us by Ken Mochizuki. It will really get students thinking about some of the less tangible benefits of athletics. It's set in a Japanese internment camp during World War II, and it tells the story of an interned Japanese-American boy and his father who build a baseball diamond and form a league in their camp and end up boosting the spirits of the other internees and promoting their dignity and self-respect. So that's a book that you can share with students. You can finish up this lesson by returning to the pictures and descriptions students made of their ideal athlete. You can have them break into small groups again and return to that exercise. Have them create a new image of an ultimate athlete based on the broader, more inclusive definition they've developed over the course of the unit. These are some example pictures which were created by adults in a training activity that we did. Moving on to Lesson 3. In Lesson 3, students have the opportunity to continue their examination of stereotypes of athletes by learning about the Jamaican bobsled team that competes in the Winter Olympics. They learn about Jamaica and its location in the Caribbean Sea and its hot, humid weather. They break into pairs and use their open mind sheets to brainstorm sports that they would expect people to play in Jamaica. Then they learn about a sport they probably didn't think of, which is bobsledding. The story of the Jamaican bobsledding team is an inspirational one. When they made their debut at the 1988 Winter Olympic Games in Calgary, they were the ultimate underdogs. They were representing a tropical country that was participating in a challenging winter sport, and they had little experience going down a bobsled track and even had to borrow spare sleds from other countries to compete. So other bobsledders were quick to give them guidance and support in a show of Olympic spirit. there was actually a movie made about this by Disney called Cool Runnings, and that's something you might find helpful. And speaking of movies, there have been a couple of movies about Olympic athletes who've overcome great odds that have come out just in the past couple of months. One is this movie, Eddie the Eagle, which is about Eddie the Eagle Edwards, a British skier and ski jumper who in 1988 became the first competitor to represent Great Britain in Olympic ski jumping. He had a lot of disadvantages. He was overweight, he was underfunded, and very farsighted. And in fact, he finished last in the Olympics. But he won great admiration for representing the true Olympic spirit as an amateur athlete who competed for the love of the sport rather than for winning. Another movie that's come out in the past couple of months is Race, which is about Jesse Owens. And the story of Jesse Owens is a great place for finishing up this unit. His story offers a great way to extend learning about the Olympics and its history of offering opportunities for athletes to challenge stereotypes and broaden minds. Jesse Owens was the son of a sharecropper and the grandson of slaves. He was not a privileged person. By the age of 7, he was actually picking up to 100 pounds of cotton a day. Nonetheless, Owens went on to success in school. In high school, he became a nationally recognized sprinter, and at Ohio State University, he broke world records in track and field. But it was the 1936 Olympic Games that made Owens world famous. As you probably know, the 1936 Games were held in Berlin under Nazi rule, and Hitler saw them as a chance to showcase Aryan supremacy. In fact, Hitler criticized the U.S. for including black athletes on its Olympic roster. Interestingly, it was the African-American athletes who made America's participation in the 1936 Games so successful. In all, the U.S. won 11 gold medals, 6 of them by black athletes. Owens captured 4 gold medals and broke 2 Olympic records along the way. In fact, his record for the world broad jump would last 25 years. Hitler stormed out of the stadium after Owens won the 100-meter event. So Jesse Owens is an example of an athlete who broadened minds and smashed stereotypes. And you can find great video of him on the Olympics website. And again, Liz is going to share that with you. That brings us to the end of Unit 4, so let's review the takeaways from the webinar. When we judge people based on physical appearance, we miss important information, jump to conclusions, and make uninformed choices. People have ingrained stereotypes about athletes and athletic achievement, and these stereotypes are often reinforced by the media. We can help students develop skills in recognizing, preventing, and debunking stereotypes. And by cultivating a broader conception of athleticism, educators can help students develop greater respect for a wider range of athletic and non-athletic achievements. This can lead to greater respect for their own achievements and for those of their classmates. So now I'd like to take this opportunity to take any questions from you about the webinar or the webinar series. In the meantime, Liz is going to send you a link for our post-webinar evaluation survey. Your feedback does enable us to better address your needs and also to continue providing these webinars free of charge. So please take a few minutes to fill out the evaluation. If you need a certificate of attendance for this webinar, you'll see that one is included in the handout section. Thank you very much for your participation, and I want to share a little more information with you. Will I be able to access these resources later? That's a question someone has asked. Yes. These handouts will be included in the section on Webinar 4 on our webinar landing page, and that can be found on our website, but I'll also be sending a link to the recording of the webinar and the handouts and everything else that's on the landing page within the next few days. Okay, another question. Earlier, a K-2 modification supplement was mentioned. Is that available? I'm really glad that you asked that question because I meant to address that already. That has been prepared and is actually just in the final stages of being edited and formatted and should be available very soon. I will send out an email to all the registrants for this webinar to let you know when it's on the website. I am not seeing a handout section here. Some people have told me that if they're using an iPad to view the webinar that they don't see the handout section. So maybe that's why you're not seeing it, but you'll be able to get them on the website. I also just sent the link. Okay. Okay. All right. So I think I've got all the questions. I want to tell you about our next webinar. It's going to be based on Unit 5 of the curriculum, Good Sportsmanship and Teamwork. This unit teaches attitudes and skills that help you develop a foundation of respect, inclusion, and teamwork, and helps you get ready for the final Olympics that you can hold with your whole group or class. So we hope you'll join us for that. That's going to be on May 5th at 12 p.m. I also would like to let you know about a webinar that I'm participating in with Teaching Tolerance next week. It's called Extreme Prejudice, and it will be aimed at mainly at middle school and high school educators, but maybe older elementary as well, and will provide you with practical strategies and approaches for explaining extremism in the classroom and addressing Islamophobia and other forms of religious-based bullying. So that's next week, April 19th, Tuesday at 5:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And finally, here's information you need to learn more about Tanenbaum and what we do. This is our website, and you can go here to learn more about the World Olympics curriculum and our other curricula. You can download free lesson plans and other resources. You can read our blog posts and articles. You can access all of our webinars, including other ones that we've done with Teaching Tolerance. And you can also contact us through the website. Okay. Do you have a link for, the webinar that I just mentioned? Yes, Liz, can you send the link for the Teaching Tolerance webinar? Okay, great. Liz sent that link. Okay. Well, thank you so much, everybody. I look forward to your joining us on May 5th, and hope you enjoyed the webinar today. And I will send a link to all of you via email very soon. Thank you, and bye-bye.